You're at a gathering. Everyone around you is laughing, talking, connecting. The energy in the room is electric. And you're counting the minutes until you can leave. Not because you're miserable, not because you dislike these people, but because something inside you is already reaching for the door, for the quiet of your own space, for the silence that feels less like absence and more like relief. Here's what nobody tells you. The world has decided that if you prefer your own company, something must be wrong with you. You must be sad, lonely, damaged, running from something. Society has built an entire narrative around the idea that connection equals health and solitude equals sickness. But what if that's backwards? What if the people who crave silence aren't broken at all, but operating on a completely different frequency? What if your nervous system, your brain chemistry, your entire psychological architecture is simply designed differently? Not worse, not deficient, just different. This isn't about being antisocial. It's not about fear or avoidance. It's about something far more fundamental. The way your mind processes reality itself. Before we go deeper, let's establish something clearly. If you prefer silence over constant company, you are not strange. You are not cold. You are not missing some essential piece of humanity that everyone else seems to have. What you are is someone whose internal world operates with a different kind of intensity. And that intensity requires something most people don't understand. Space. The guilt you might feel when you decline invitations, when you choose a quiet evening alone over a social event, when you feel relief rather than loneliness in solitude. That guilt is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It's a sign that you've internalized a cultural story that was never written for people like you. So let that go. Right now, you're about to understand why you are the way you are. Let's start with your nervous system, because this is where the real story begins. Every human nervous system has a threshold, a limit to how much stimulation it can process before it starts to feel overwhelmed. But these thresholds vary wildly from person to person. Some people have nervous systems that are like wide-open highways, built to handle enormous amounts of traffic without breaking a sweat. Others have nervous systems more like narrow mountain roads, where even moderate traffic creates congestion. If you prefer silence, chances are you fall into the second category. Psychologists call this high sensitivity or sensory processing sensitivity. Your nervous system picks up on everything: the emotional undercurrents in a conversation, the slight tension in someone's voice, the energy in a room, the subtle dynamics between people. This isn't a weakness. It's a different kind of processing power. But it comes at a cost. You burn through energy faster. Think about it this way. Imagine two computers running the same program. One has a simple processor that handles basic tasks efficiently. The other has a sophisticated processor that runs complex background analyses on everything, cross-referencing data, detecting patterns, processing multiple layers of information simultaneously. Which computer is going to drain its battery faster? Your brain is the second computer. In social situations, you're not just having conversations. You're reading micro-expressions, interpreting tone, monitoring group dynamics, managing your own presentation, processing sensory input from multiple sources. You're running dozens of programs at once, most of them unconsciously. And after a few hours, your battery is depleted. Silence isn't escapism for you. It's recharging. It's your nervous system finally getting to operate at its natural baseline instead of in overdrive. Now let's talk about dopamine, because this is where things get really interesting. Dopamine is the neurotransmitter associated with reward, motivation, and pleasure. But here's what most people don't realize. People have different baseline levels of dopamine sensitivity. Some people need constant external stimulation to feel satisfied. Their brains crave novelty, excitement, social interaction. They're dopamine seekers. Others have naturally higher dopamine sensitivity. Their brains don't need as much external input to feel stimulated. In fact, too much external stimulation can push them into a state of overstimulation, where the dopamine system gets flooded and everything starts to feel uncomfortable. If you prefer silence, you're likely in this second group. Your brain finds richness in subtlety. A quiet evening with a book, a solitary walk, time spent thinking. These activities generate enough internal stimulation to satisfy you. You don't need the dopamine hit of constant social interaction because your internal world already produces sufficient reward. This is why you can spend hours alone and feel perfectly content while others would feel restless or bored. Your brain is designed to extract meaning and pleasure from quieter experiences. But here's the paradox that confuses people. You can enjoy socializing. You can love certain people deeply. You can have fulfilling conversations and meaningful connections. It's not that you can't handle social interaction. It's that you process it differently, and you need recovery time afterward. It's like the difference between someone who can eat spicy food all day and someone who enjoys spicy food but needs something mild afterward to balance their system. Neither person is defective. They just have different tolerances. There's a concept in psychology called locus of orientation, whether you're primarily internally or externally oriented. Most people are externally oriented. They understand themselves through their interactions with the world. They need external feedback to feel validated, external stimulation to feel engaged, external presence to feel complete. You're internally oriented. You have a rich inner life. Thoughts, ideas, observations, reflections that constantly unfold in your mind. You don't need constant external input because you're never truly alone. You have yourself. This is why other people's presence can sometimes feel intrusive. Not because you dislike them, but because they interrupt the ongoing conversation you're having with your own mind. Every social interaction requires you to pause your internal dialogue, redirect your attention outward, and engage with someone else's rhythm. Imagine you're reading a deeply absorbing book. Someone walks up and starts talking to you. You can put the book down and have the conversation, but part of you is still in the story, still thinking about the last sentence you read, still wanting to return to that internal space. That's what your entire life feels like. Your internal world is the book you never want to put down. Other people are constant interruptions, however well-meaning. This doesn't make you selfish. It makes you someone who experiences consciousness differently. Your relationship with your own mind is your primary relationship. Everything else is secondary. Here's something you probably recognize but have never named. Social interaction, for you, is an energy exchange that rarely balances out. When you're with other people, you're giving constantly. Attention, emotional labor, social performance, mental processing. You're tracking their needs, adjusting your behavior, maintaining the flow of interaction. Even when you're enjoying yourself, there's an undercurrent of effort. And what do you receive in return? Sometimes genuine connection, yes. Sometimes interesting conversation. But often, it's just noise, chatter, surface-level exchange that doesn't match the energy you're putting out. This is why you might feel exhausted after spending time with people you actually like. It's not about them. It's about the fundamental imbalance between what socializing costs you and what it returns. Now think about silence. When you're alone, you're not giving anything to anyone. You're not performing. You're not managing anyone else's emotions or expectations. You're just existing, processing, being. For the first time, the energy flows inward instead of outward. You're filling your own cup instead of pouring from it. This is why solitude doesn't feel lonely to you. Loneliness is wanting connection and not having it. What you experience in solitude is something completely different. It's relief. It's coming home to yourself. It's the feeling of finally being able to breathe at your natural rhythm instead of matching someone else's pace. Of course, we can't talk about this without acknowledging how it might have started. Some people are born with sensitive nervous systems. It's temperamental, biological. But for others, the preference for silence was learned, carved out of necessity during childhood. Maybe you grew up in a chaotic household where noise equaled danger, where raised voices meant conflict, where silence was the only time you felt safe. Maybe you grew up feeling misunderstood, constantly having to explain yourself, never quite fitting into the social scripts everyone else seemed to follow naturally. And slowly, you learned that being alone was easier than trying to translate yourself to a world that didn't speak your language. Maybe you were sensitive as a child, and the world told you that was a problem, that you were too much, or too intense, or too deep. So you retreated inward, building a rich internal world where you didn't have to dilute yourself for others' comfort. Or maybe you're just someone who realized early that other people are complicated, that relationships require compromise, negotiation, constant adjustment. And at some point, you decided that the freedom of solitude was worth more than the comfort of constant company. Whatever the origin, the result is the same. You learned that silence is not empty. It's full of your own thoughts, your own rhythm, your own way of being that doesn't require explanation or justification. Here's where it gets complex, because this isn't a simple story about preferring solitude over people. The truth is, you probably crave deep connection as much as anyone, maybe more. But what you crave is a specific kind of connection, one that doesn't require you to abandon yourself. You don't want surface-level friendships maintained through constant contact and empty conversation. You want relationships where silence is comfortable, where you can sit in the same room with someone and not talk and feel completely at ease, where connection doesn't mean constant interaction, but a deeper recognition of shared understanding. You want people who get that your need for space isn't rejection, who understand that you can care deeply about them while also needing significant time alone, who don't take your silence personally. But these people are rare. Most people interpret your need for solitude as coldness. They think that if you loved them more, you'd want to be around them more. They don't understand that for you, love and space aren't contradictory. They're complementary. So you often end up choosing solitude not because you don't want connection, but because the connections available to you require you to betray your own needs. And at a certain point, you realize that being alone is less lonely than being with people who make you feel wrong for being who you are. This is the painful paradox. You're often most lonely when you're surrounded by people, and most at peace when you're alone. Let's acknowledge something uncomfortable. Modern society is structurally hostile to people like you. We live in a world that glorifies constant connectivity, open offices, group projects, team-building exercises, social media that demands you broadcast your life constantly, a culture that treats introversion like a problem to be solved and solitude like a red flag. From childhood, you're pushed into group activities. School is designed around constant social interaction. Success is often measured by networking, visibility, personal branding, all things that require you to be on constantly. And if you resist, if you set boundaries, decline invitations, limit your availability, you're seen as difficult, unfriendly, not a team player. The message is clear. Your natural way of being is inconvenient for everyone else. But here's what nobody tells you. The world's preference for extroversion isn't a natural law. It's cultural. It's one particular way of organizing society that happens to benefit certain temperaments while pathologizing others. There are entire cultures and historical periods where solitude was valued, where silence was seen as wisdom, where people who preferred their own company were viewed as thoughtful, self-sufficient, deep rather than defective. Your preference for silence isn't a personal failing. It's a mismatch between who you are and what this particular moment in history demands. When you're alone, something remarkable happens. The constant static of social performance fades away, and you can finally hear yourself think. This is when your real thoughts emerge, not the carefully curated thoughts you share in conversation, but the weird, wandering, half-formed ideas that don't fit neatly into words. The observations you'd never say aloud because they're too strange or too honest or too complex to translate. You notice things. The way light moves across the wall. The pattern of your own thoughts. The subtle shifts in your emotional state that would be drowned out by someone else's presence. You make connections between ideas, You process experiences that happened weeks ago, but are only now filtering through to conscious understanding. You have realizations that feel profound, not because they're objectively groundbreaking, but because they're yours, genuinely, authentically yours, untouched by anyone else's perspective. This is what people who constantly need company are missing. They're so busy filling every moment with interaction that they never get to know the texture of their own consciousness. They mistake the silence for emptiness because they've never stayed in it long enough to discover what emerges when everything else falls away. You know something they don't. You are enough company for yourself. Your own mind is interesting enough, complex enough, alive enough to sustain you. That's not loneliness. That's self-sufficiency at a psychological level most people never achieve. Here's what maturity brings. The realization that preferring silence doesn't mean you have to live in complete isolation. It means choosing your engagements carefully, protecting your energy like the finite resource it is, saying yes to the people and experiences that genuinely matter, and no, without guilt, to everything else. It means building a life that honors your needs rather than forcing yourself into a template designed for someone else. Maybe that's a career that allows solitude, a living situation that provides sanctuary, relationships with people who respect your rhythms. It means understanding that you're not obligated to maintain friendships that drain you, that it's okay to have a small social circle or to go weeks without seeing anyone. That quality trumps quantity in every aspect of life, including human connection. And perhaps most importantly, it means giving yourself permission to be fully who you are instead of constantly trying to be more social, more available, more like everyone else. Because here's the truth. You could probably force yourself to be more socially active. You could override your natural preferences, push through the exhaustion, train yourself to crave company. But why would you? What exactly would you gain by becoming a less authentic version of yourself? Let's zoom out for a moment and ask a bigger question. What is your preference for silence actually about? On the surface, it's about nervous system sensitivity, dopamine regulation, energy management. But at a deeper level, it's about something more fundamental: your relationship with existence itself. Most people experience life primarily through their interactions with others. They need the external world to confirm that they're real, that they matter, that they exist in a meaningful way. You experience life primarily through your internal awareness. You exist most fully when you're alone with your own consciousness, observing your thoughts, feeling your feelings, witnessing the continuous unfolding of your inner experience. In a strange way, you're more directly engaged with the raw fact of being alive. Not life as a social performance, but life as a subjective experience. The mysterious reality of being a conscious entity in a complex universe. This is why forced social interaction can feel so hollow to you. It's not that you can't connect with people. It's that shallow connection pulls you away from something deeper, your direct encounter with existence itself. Philosophers have talked about this for centuries. Thinkers who retreated from society not because they hated people, but because they were pursuing something that required solitude, genuine self-knowledge, authentic presence, unmediated experience. You're not running from life by preferring silence. You're running toward a more direct engagement with life, one that happens in the quiet spaces between words, in the privacy of your own awareness. So here's what it comes down to. You're not broken because you prefer silence over company. You're not missing out on life because you spend time alone. You're not cold or damaged or incomplete. You're someone whose depth requires space, whose intensity requires quiet, whose richness unfolds in solitude rather than in crowds. The world will keep telling you that you should want more company, more connection, more constant interaction. It will keep suggesting that something is wrong with you for preferring your own presence. But you know better now. You understand that your nervous system isn't defective, it's sensitive. That your dopamine system isn't broken, it's efficient. That your need for silence isn't avoidance, it's necessity. You are not the absence of something. You are the presence of something rare, Someone who has learned to be complete without constant external validation. Someone who has discovered that the most profound conversations sometimes happen in silence. Someone who knows that being alone and being lonely are not the same thing. The people who matter will understand this. They'll respect your boundaries, value your presence when you offer it, and never make you feel guilty for needing space. Everyone else? They were never your people anyway. So keep honoring what you know about yourself. Keep protecting your solitude like the sacred thing it is. Keep trusting that your way of being in the world is not wrong, just different. Because in a world that never stops talking, your silence is not emptiness. It's where you become most fully yourself. It's where you finally get to rest. And maybe that's the whole point.